It's 6 p.m. on a Friday here in Korea. Thank you for joining us for this newscast. I'm Daniel Choi. Let's start with the headlines. In a meeting with her cabinet, President Park Geun-hye urged implementation of bold deregulation reforms for promising industries, including modification of rules and elimination of authorization steps. After days of boycotting the National Assembly over the government's decision to state author history textbooks, the main opposition party finally decides to normalize all the parliamentary schedules, but vows to continue protesting the decision outside the parliament. And the full text of the TPP has been released, but Korea is still undecided on whether to join the trade pact or not. The Trade Ministry will thoroughly check the fine print and hold further discussions before making that decision. Let's begin with the fourth deregulation reform meeting at the nation's top office. President Park Geun-hye and her cabinet reviewed progress made in their previous meetings, and she discussed further ways to improve measures. Hwang Sung-hee has our top story.
President Park opened Friday's meeting by reiterating the importance of deregulatory reform. For the past 2 years, the government has been pushing for the easing of regulations to prop up the economy.
우리 경제 활력 회복과 미래 먹거리 확보를 위해서는 시장 수요와 기술 발전에 상응하는 규제 개혁의 업그레이드가 필요하다고 생각합니다. 규제 개혁은 우리의 미래 먹거리 창출을 위한 가장 효과적인 수단이라고 할 수 있습니다.
The efforts were worthwhile. 39 new investments from eased regulations this year yielded 12,000 new jobs and an economic effect of $9.6 billion. From this point on, the president said unnecessary business restrictions must not block the growth of new industries.
새로운 상품 개발과 시장 창출을 촉진하기 위해서 미리 관련 제도와 규범을 정비하는 선제적 규제 개혁에도 관심을 기울여야 하겠습니다.
For one, the Cabinet Office said it will improve its authorization process, including the lifting of 36 unnecessary authorization guidelines. The move is expected to save $4.7 billion in costs and bring about a $7.5 billion increase in sales. And with a handful of deregulation bills sitting idle at the National Assembly, President Park called on the parliament to join the government's efforts. She asked lawmakers to consider the livelihoods of the people and swiftly pass the related bills. Hwang Sung-hee, Arirang News.
Korea's rival parties have finally agreed to put an end to a parliamentary impasse stemming from the government's plans to implement state-authored history textbooks at the nation's secondary schools. For the latest developments, we turn to our National Assembly correspondent, Park Ji-won.
Korea's main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy ended their boycott of the assembly and will resume their parliamentary duties from next Monday.
Our party has decided to normalize all parliamentary affairs from next Monday to put the livelihoods of people first.
But the Liberal Party's floor leader stressed that his party will continue protests outside of parliament by joining with civil organizations to stop the government from issuing state-authored history textbooks at the nation's secondary schools. The party began sit-in protests at the National Assembly on Monday evening after the government confirmed its decision, and members have not attended to any parliamentary activities since. The ruling Saenuri Party welcomed the decision, saying it is a responsible act. Before this decision was made, the Conservative Party urged their counterparts on Friday morning to fulfill their parliamentary duties.
It is a betrayal of the people's trust. The National Assembly is paralyzed for reasons unrelated to the livelihoods of people at a time when the economic situation is severe.
The Conservative Party stressed that pending bills, especially those related to labor reform intended to create jobs for the youth and the Korea-China FTA, are in urgent need of parliamentary approval. Although the main opposition has decided to return to parliament, bipartisan conflict is expected to remain, particularly concerning the government's budget discussions for next year. The opposition party says budget deliberations that were conducted without NPAD lawmakers in attendance at the meeting should be discussed again from next Monday. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
This just in, it turns out that Seoul has already made multiple attempts to bring Pyongyang back to the table for inter-Korean talks, but North Korea has not accepted any of these proposals. Officials at Seoul's Unification Ministry told reporters that Seoul has invited Pyongyang for governmental talks 3 times since late September, but Pyongyang did not respond or accept. For the last invitation sent out on October 31st, Pyongyang did not even bother to receive the letter from the border office of Panmunjom. The South Korean government, however, added that there is positive momentum in relations between the two sides, with both having complied with terms agreed upon at their high-level talks in August, particularly in civilian exchanges. South Korea's Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se, now in Luxembourg for the ASEM Foreign Ministers meeting, is continuing to garner international support for Seoul's efforts to denuclearize North Korea. He will travel to Iran on Saturday for talks with his Iranian counterpart Mohammad Javad Zarif. The officials will discuss Tehran's progress following its landmark nuclear agreement, as well as North Korea's nuclear ambitions. The South Korean minister will meet Iran's President Hassan Rouhani to reinforce bilateral relations between the two countries and discuss regional issues in the Middle East and Northeast Asia. Yoon is the first South Korean foreign minister to visit Iran since 2001. It clocks in at 6,000 pages. The full text of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, or TPP, trade deal is finally up for everyone to see. After assessing the fine print, the Korean government says the TPP is not that different from the free trade deal between Seoul and Washington. For details, let's turn to Kim Min-ji.
No big surprises. That's what Korea's trade ministry said about the level of market liberalization of the recently agreed U.S.-led trade pact, adding that the TPP is similar to the free trade agreement between Seoul and Washington. The long-awaited text of the deal was released on Thursday after being under wraps for more than 5 years, revealing the details of a pact which will open up trade in 40% of the world's economy. The comprehensive agreement outlines a market opening for 95 to 100% of export goods depending on the country over the course of 30 years. This is about the same as the Korea-US deal that eliminates tariffs on 98 to 100% of products over 25 years. Although Korea may not face any immediate consequences due to a string of existing free trade agreements in effect, experts warn that eventually Korean products could lose their competitive edge in the global market. This comes as most countries in the TPP have agreed to fully open their manufacturing sectors to foreign goods, an area in which Korea has a strong foothold. For one, the U.S. plans to scrap tariffs on Japanese electronic and mechanical products immediately, whereas the Korea-U.S. FTA eliminates tariffs on manufactured goods over 10 years, which means Korean products won't be tariff-free until 2021.
Because Korea and Japan compete in similar sectors, the TPP will put Japan at a great advantage, and the deal will only give favor to products that use parts and components made within the trading bloc.
The expert added that for now, Korea should take time to closely assess the regulations of the trade pact before deciding when to join, and that joining with other countries with similar interest could be a strategy for negotiating terms. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Korea's tourism industry has lost billions of dollars in revenue over the past few months due to the recent outbreak of the Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, or MERS. The Korea Culture and Tourism Institute says the number of foreign tourists who visited Korea from June to September was 1.5 million lower this year than the same period last year. Also, from July to August, when fears about the outbreak were at their peak, accommodation and tourist attractions saw an 80% on-year drop in guests and visitors. Given that the average tourist spends $1,200 during their stay, the institute says the nation's tourism sector suffered losses of between $2.5 to $3.1 billion as a result of the MERS outbreak. The virus that began in May infected more than 180 people and killed 37 before it was brought under de facto control in late July. Hyundai Motors' rebranding of its existing Genesis sedan into a separate luxury brand is receiving glowing reviews from foreign media. Reuters reports that the premium lineup should help boost profitability and fits with Chairman Chung Mong-gu's long-held ambitions to take the carmaker more upmarket. Automotive News says the sub-brand will help Hyundai improve its image from good value to one that's more associated with style and prestige, just like Korean tech giant Samsung Electronics. Hyundai's new luxury lineup team aims to have 6 new models on the road by 2020 as it attempts to compete with Lexus and Mercedes. Within just a span of a year, the number of temporary workers previously on the decline has been on the rise here in Korea. So what's behind this sudden increase? Shin Se-min takes a closer look.
3 out of 10 paid workers in Korea are temporary workers. As of August this year, the number of temporary workers reached over 6.2 million, accounting for 32.5% of total workers, a figure that exceeds the OECD average of 22. The average monthly salary for temporary workers was just over $1,288, slightly more than half of what regular workers would earn. And while regular workers' salaries rose 3.5%, that of temporary workers barely inched up 1%. The number of hourly, contingent, and non-standard workers all increased compared to the previous year.
What's interesting to note is that the growth of temporary workers was led by women and those aged 60 and over. The reason? Former business owners opting for quick employment after going out of business.
The National Tax Service says that on average, there are approximately 960 new businesses being opened annually, but that an overwhelming majority, 800,000, end up going out of business. The current job market is also causing many to lose their footing.
At this stage, I can only do so much, so I'm just thankful to be working.
We just have to bite the bullet. With my contract nearing its end, I'm worried how I should restructure my career.
But it's a crisis foreseen.
The gap hasn't narrowed. Government's goals of expanding employment have sidetracked because employment surged on the back of booming hourly paid workers, a crisis that will only distort our already imbalanced job market.
Adding that the overuse of the labor and the discrimination against temporary workers on their welfare front is the most dire issue among the workforce, experts add the need to shrink the temporary working population is imminent. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Moving on to other stories, to some, history may not be the most exciting of subjects, but that perception may change thanks to traditional assets recreated for application in our daily lives through technology. Lee Soo-eun has more.
Today's forum takes place under the theme Rediscovering Korea Through Science and aims to transform Korea's traditional assets into cultural and other products. At first, this may conjure up thoughts like historical artifacts or some ancient philosophy, but it's not just about the past.
It's about what's happening here, where I am now. It can be anything and everything in daily life.
He gives the example of developing a bridge over the Han River, an inevitable part of daily life in Seoul, into a cultural product.
You can build a 2-story bridge. The lower level of the bridge will operate a high-speed shuttle for pedestrians with a path for bicycles. On top, there will be restaurants selling food from various eras in our history and multicultural shops too. It will expand the nation's image of a dynamic Korea.
Another expert, film director Lee Seung-yeol, shares his experience in film production atop a traditional rocket invented in 15th century Korea.
Shingijeon was an unprecedented accomplishment in the history of humanity in terms of size and range for a rocket. I wanted Koreans to take pride in our historical assets.
The Ministry of Science, which hosted the forum, emphasizes that science creates future value from historical resources.
Tradition has often been marginalized because history mainly focused on modernization. It's the role of science and technology to develop hidden traditional assets for use in daily life for Koreans and the rest of the world.
Convergence of science and culture, transcending the boundaries of time, is the keystone to leveraging traditional assets and ultimately enhancing Korea's brand. Lee Soo-eun, Arirang News.
Korea's Hanmi Pharmaceutical has signed a license deal with a major French drug maker to develop experimental diabetes treatment. According to our Kwon Jang-ho, this could be the biggest pharmaceutical deal in Korea's history.
French drug maker Sanofi signed a license deal on Thursday for Hanmi Pharmaceutical's Quantum project. It's a diabetes treatment in development aiming to turn daily insulin treatments into monthly ones. Hanmi will receive $430 million initially, but that figure could reach as high as $4.2 billion after registration and sales milestones, as well as double-digit royalties on net sales. Sanofi will have exclusive rights to develop and commercialize the treatment worldwide. However, Hanmi will maintain the option to co-commercialize the products in Korea and China. Nearly 400 million people worldwide suffer from diabetes, and that number is expected to keep growing. The treatment has yet to be approved by the FDA, the American regulatory body, but early signs indicate it will pass without issue. It has been a strong year in the pharmaceutical research and development industry in Korea. Korean pharmaceutical company Green Cross signed a deal to supply the World Health Organization with varicella vaccines in a deal worth $75 million, as well as a deal for flu vaccines worth $29 million. On Tuesday, it was also announced that a drug to treat high blood pressure called Kanab, developed by another Korean company, Boryong Pharmaceutical, has become the most prescribed medication by cardiovascular specialists in Mexico since hitting the market last year. Kwon Jang-ho, Arirang News.
And that's all from us. Thank you for watching. Tune in for more at 10 p.m. Korea time with News Center.